Dark Shadows Festival is proud to present Mr. Sy Tomashoff.
Can't hear me? Can you hear me now? How's that? Testing, 1, 2. Are we okay? It's better. Okay. Another thing to worry about other than not being prepared. How's that? Is that any better? Very much. If I get very close. Okay, we can hear now. I'm very close. Okay. First off, I'd like to say welcome, and I feel very welcome. And I'm very excited to be part of the Dark Shadows Festival. Let me just start off by saying that I just saw a floor plan of one of the Dark Shadows programs right over here on the table. And yeah, it's 18 years ago or 20 years ago. And I look at it in terms of the studio that I'm working in now, at CBS here in California. And this studio that we did Dark Shadows from is a toy in terms of the size of it. It was a very small studio. And yet we got it all in there, and I must say that when we look at the shows today, they look like they were done in a large studio. So that in itself, I think, says a lot for the production. I'm hoping that you will have a lot of questions because I'm not a great speaker. So that the more hands that fly up, the more fascinating this talk will be. I was very proud to be part of the costume contest today with Diana. And this has afforded Diana a chance for us to see each other after not seeing each other for at least 3 years. Before that, it was even longer than that. And it's been very exciting to get together with the people that are on Dark Shadows. I have seen Lara Parker. When I was working on Capitol about 2 years ago, she made an appearance on Capitol. Also, I'm working with Jim Storm, who was on Dark Shadows. He's now a member of the cast of The Bold and the Beautiful. I saw Jonathan when he did his Fools and Fiends out here at the library about 4 or 5 months ago. But anyway, let's go back to designing the sets for Dark Shadows. It was a challenge for me, and at the time that I came to do Dark Shadows, I remember having met Bob Costello, the producer, for lunch. And he said he was going to be doing a new soap opera, and was I interested in doing it? And I said, no, I don't do soap operas. We had lunch, and I had a couple of martinis, and then I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it for about a year. And as it turned out, I did do it for the full run, and there was never a moment of regret, because I think it's probably the most creative show that was ever on television. And as I was talking to Diana earlier today, I said, I don't think that we have the capacity to do that kind of a show on television anymore because we are too technically sophisticated and knowledgeable today to accept the possible mistakes or blunders that might have happened that we were able to accept in those days. We said, well, we've got a half an hour, this is what we want to do, let's go for it. And well, I guess 9 times out of 10 we did get what we were after. And if we didn't, it was on tape and we put it on the air. The things I remember about the starting up of Dark Shadows was that we had to find a town that would serve as Collinwood or Collinsport. And they didn't have a town, and Dan Curtis said to me one day, we're going to put you in a small Piper Cub with a pilot, and we want you to go up and down the coast, the eastern coast, up in New England, and find a town that we can use. And my wife, Naomi, said, not unless he's insured. So Dan Curtis had no problem. He said, fine, you are insured, get in the plane. And that was when we found, I can't remember the name of the town, Essex, Connecticut, on the Atlantic, somewhat inland in the Atlantic. And I saw the town from a couple of thousand feet in the air, and it looked, and you know, I put my camera out the window, and it looked like a small town that would work. And so I came back and I said to Dan, there is this town up there. I said, but I think you should send up a survey crew to determine if it has all the features that you want it to have. Of course, they did nothing like that. They simply got the crew in the truck and they went out and photographed it. So much for surveys. If you're ready to put up some questions, well, here we go. We've got one right away.
In 1795, you had various landscapes and pictures on the wall. And in Sarah's room, I was always tickled. The portrait on the wall was painted end of 1880s.
That was a portrait of 2 children, if I'm not mistaken, was it not? One child?
No, 2 adults.
2 adults? In the children's room?
Yeah, in Sarah's sick room.
I don't remember the particular portrait, but all I can say is that I would have certain criteria about the paintings. I wanted them to be real paintings and not something just created for the show, because it's hard to find an artist who would create something of a vintage look. So I would try to find something, a vintage look that actually existed already. And I remember going down to Greenwich Village to some of the galleries in New York to find paintings that we could use on the show that would have an authentic look. And you say that we were off by how many years?
Oh, about 80.
About 80 years. Well, that's a lot. Don't tell Dan Curtis. Gentleman over here in the striped sweater.
Yes, I have 2 questions. We could probably ask them that were one question. I'm wondering what your week or day was like on Dark Shadows, and how often in advance did you find out that you had to create a certain set?
How much in advance? Okay, let me start out by saying that I was hired about 6 weeks before the show started to tape. I was fortunate enough into having an assistant hired for me to do some of the drafting, because we were going to meetings, we were going up to Connecticut and Newport, where we found the house that was going to serve as the exterior for the mansion, Collinwood. What my day was like. Well, the unfortunate thing about working Dark Shadows was that my office was at 70th Street in New York, whereas the studio was on 53rd Street in New York. So I kind of had to run back and forth a lot. And my day would start out that I would come into the studio in the morning while the actors were rehearsing and just go around the studio to see that all of the props were in place or where we needed them for that day's show. That was how I'd spend the morning. Then I could go back up to my office and start reading scripts and laying out the shows for the following week. Then I would come back to the studio for a run-through, which was a half hour, then a half hour of notes, a dress rehearsal, half hour of notes, and then the final taping. And sucker that I was, I stayed for the final taping because I was so fascinated by the show. Anyway, each time they would have their notes, I would be able to go into the studio and make revisions on the sets. In other words, if a picture needed to be moved over just for composition-wise and the shooting, that was the time that I could do that. Or if a flat needed to be added, a wall needed to be added, or something needed to be touched up, then I would get out there during those note times. And the reason I'm harping on that is that the way television is done today, there's no such thing. If you didn't get it right the first time you said it, that was it. That is it, I should say. Because now the way we do it in small pieces, and we come to each set and block the scene and then tape it immediately. So that if there was a wall that needed to be added, by the time you got to the studio, the show is already on tape, or that scene is already on tape. So that's kind of an interesting difference that has taken place in the last 20 years. Then after the show, for instance on Dark Shadows, would finish taping at 4 or 4:30. Am I right on that, Diana? Then they would tear down the sets that were not going to play the following day, and we would set up the sets that were going to play the following day, which usually was maybe 2 or 3 sets. That could go on for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, sometimes even longer. I remember when we did the demise of Collinwood in 1999, and we had to show that it was in disrepair and the beams had fallen down, plaster had come off the wall, the brick was exposed, weeds had grown through the windows, the glass in the windows were broken, the drapes were hanging torn and tattered. I remember that I had planned to put up like 6 fallen beams. We worked all night, and by midnight I still had 2 beams left to put up, and the carpenter said, "Oh, we're going home." So there were 2 beams that never got hung. So there were some late night setups, but that was what the day was like. Does that answer? There's a hand over here.
Who was the artist that did your best painting, Angelique's painting, and Barnabas' painting, and what happened to those paintings?
Andy Cloris, who was a business agent, I believe, had done a couple of, most of the early paintings, the Barnabas painting, Josette painting, and where are those paintings now? I don't know, maybe hanging in some ABC official house. I can only tell you that I know that the original Barnabas painting that hung in the foyer, the last year of the show, we came in after a weekend on a Monday morning, and the painting was out of the frame, disappeared. The frame was hanging on the wall, but the painting was gone. And that was a nervous moment. What happened though is we still had a photograph of that painting, and we brought it to the Scenic Art Shop where they gave us another one. It really was not the same. It just can't be done that way. And what was interesting about the first painting was the first painting of Barnabas was done before Jonathan Fried was hired. Well, I mean, to this extent. We got Bob Costello dressed up in all the accoutrements for the portrait, and we took a picture of him with the rings, the cane, the clothes that he was going to wear, everything, but we still hadn't gotten a face to put in it. So finally, when Barnabas did come in, all we had to do was paint in Jonathan's face. It worked out pretty well. This lady back here.
I'd like to know, in Holland's tomb, the secret door, what materials was the tomb made out of, and how did you make the secret door work? And also, in the old house, you almost always use blue candles. Why don't you get blue instead of white?
Were they always blue?
Not always, but most of the time.
Most of the time. Well, there's always a problem. Well, I shouldn't say there's always a problem, but very often there's a problem with white candles, or white, the color white, because it pushes the color scale too high up. And on television, for the most part, camera equipment, the scale of white to black is from here to here. And we find that the camera can accept it better if we pull in the black and pull in the white so that it's off black, a little lighter than black, and a little darker than white. Then the picture seems to be a little bit more balanced. We did use a lot of blue candles, and I think it was just that we wanted to avoid using anything that was white, and it gave more color, and I guess that was it was the time that color was first coming into existence, and that's interesting in itself, because Dark Shadows was in black and white the first year, and I remember that when it was going to go to color, a lot of people came to me and said, "Sy, what are you going to do? We're going to be in color now." And I said, these sets were designed for color. I mean, who thinks in black and white? Lady in the red shirt.
What was your favorite time period to design? And also, why was the year 1795 picked as a particular year to redress?
I think probably because that's when they hung witches, or hanged witches, whatever it is. I don't know when we hit on that storyline. I do remember that we had a seance with Victoria and a couple of the Collinses, and we harked back to the days of witch hunts, and we even did a gallows scene later when Victoria was supposed to be hanged on the gallows. Just so that we could have some kind of a connection with the occult and witches and all of those nice things that we all like to experience every day. My favorite time period. I guess I would have to say like the 1890s, because we had the oil lamps and the candles, and it was kind of a very romantic kind of a time. Costumes were wonderful without being overly cumbersome, and it's just wonderful things that we could do with the candlelight and oil light. This gentleman over here.
I have two questions. Do you have a favorite set that you designed for the program? And the other question is, there was one set in particular that the old house, the exterior to the old house, did not quite match up with what they had utilized as the photo, the slide that they used as the old house, the set versus the slide. And I wondered if there was any reason.
I'm lost in terms of the pictures of the old house. You say it didn't match with...
The Scrap Mansion was like a white column building, and
yes.
The exterior set that you designed it was brick. It was like
yes. Did we use brick on the outside of the house in the studio?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Well, again, don't tell Dan Curtis. Well, we designed the old house before we did the exterior location and the shooting. The first time we ever used the exterior location was when we saw Josette's image or ghost dancing or prancing around the exterior of the old house. As I say, the set already existed before we found the old house. That was a wonderful episode when we had the painting of Josette over the mantle. I don't know if you all remember that, but she walked out of the portrait. And then I think it was from there that she walked around into the outside of the actual old house. The old house, incidentally, is gone. I went back there about 8 or 10 years ago, to see if it was still standing, and it has been indeed torn down, which is too bad. It was a marvelous old house. Yes?
I wanted to get more into your background. How did you start out as a set designer? Did you run a kind of art?
Okay, the way I got into set design was really through the back door, I guess, or a side door. Back door sounds bad. I was actually trained as an architect, and I can't think of a better way for a set designer to get his training than studying architecture. But while I was in college, I did study some scene design and some stage lighting. And after graduating from college and working in the field of architecture for about a year, I met some classmates of mine from Carnegie Tech who were working in television, and it sounded like a fascinating medium to me. And so I said, how do I get to do that kind of work? And they said, well, you just have to take the exam, and if you pass the exam, then you can work in this field. That was the United Scenic Artists exam. It was a 2-day examination. The first day was pretty much academics, where you had to identify architecture styles, furniture periods, periods of costumes. I even had to do a costume plate. I did the one and only costume plate of my life for that test, because I was not intending to be a costume designer. That was the first day, and there was some perspective drawings to be done and a set to be done. It was a rather intense examination. The second day was to create a drop from a small rendering on a 6-foot wall. That was tougher for me because I had never painted. So I just did whatever the guy next to me was doing. And for some reason or other, I did pass both parts of the exam, and my union card entitles me to all categories. In other words, I can design costumes if I get a job. Certainly I wouldn't be able to. I can paint scenery, which I have done a couple of times between design projects. And I can design for television, stage, and film in New York. However, in California, I would not be able to design for film until somebody died or gave me a job. But that was the way I came into designing for television. Man in the Blue Jacket.
Yeah, I was wondering, is there any particular reason why everybody in Collinsburg had that same lamp with the green shade?
Did you come up here to show me off? Yes, I guess there is, and that reason would have been budget. Simply budget, yes. This man here.
Could you
tell more about how you designed the secret room in the mausoleum?
Oh, yes, yes. I'm sorry. I detoured, didn't I? The secret room in the mausoleum. The set was made out of normal materials, the lumber and plywood and canvas that we normally use. There was no metal used in it except for the nails and screws. Now, we had 3 panels and 3 sarcophagi, excuse me. We needed a trick way to get into the secret compartment behind the mausoleum interior, because that's, of course, where Barnabas's coffin was. So the way that we plotted it, story-wise, and prop-wise, Willie Loomis goes out because he's heard that he could find the jewelry, which would be very precious in this mausoleum. He gets into the mausoleum and he finds that the lids on each of the sarcophagi are too heavy to lift off. So he figures there is a ring above each coffin in a lion's mouth. I don't know if you remember that particular detail. Okay, so he decides to put the rope through the ring and attach it to the lid and pull it like a pulley and yank the rope. Well, what he didn't know, of course, was that behind the ring there was a spring mechanism that tripped the door. And so when he pulled on the rope, it pulled the ring, tripped the door, and the door went like that. And that's the way he got into the secret chamber. Now, let me see. It didn't actually work that the ring was the mechanism that opened the door, because there were a couple of stagehands and they had some trick line and they pulled the door after the ring pulled down.
Was the secret room supposed to be all closed, or did it have any openings like windows?
No, it was completely closed. There was one window in the mausoleum, and there was an iron gate in the mausoleum. Interestingly enough, about the iron gate in the mausoleum, I wanted an iron gate for it because I figured the design of it would be more interesting and it would be spookier. And I found an iron gate at one of the rental places that I used to get props from, and I sent it into the shop, and it was very heavy. And as always, the shop carpenter will say, "Hey, we'll make this for you out of plywood. You don't need to use this." I said, "No, I think I want the iron gate." And of course it turned out that it really provided us with the sound, because people were always coming and banging on the iron gate. It wouldn't have sounded the same if it was wood. So I was glad that I had opted to stick to my guns and say, I want the iron gate. The man in the brown shirt.
In the Hall of Hollywood, when the
Yes.
actors and actresses go up the stairs and then cross the landing,
Right.
and they go through the door,
Right.
and they have to exit their scene up there. Was there a spiral staircase on the inside that door for them
No.
to exit the scene?
No.
What was on the other side?
The other side was probably just a little piece of platform with a railing around it. If they took 2 steps, they were on the ground. Space was at a premium. Yes. Gentleman in the back.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the house in East Hollywood. If you have any information on the history of the house, who was living in at the time, were you ever inside it? What was it set up, furniture, period?
Yes, I was inside of it. We did take a trip up. It was in Newport, Rhode Island. And at the time that we were there, as I recall, it was some government official had lived in there, but it had then been sold, and it was operating as a girls' school. In terms of the furnishings in it, there wasn't anything very distinctive about the furnishings, but the architecture of the interior was very distinguished. I I copied the front door detail because I knew that we would have scenes outside of the front door. That's as far as I could go in terms of the architecture and matching the architecture, because we needed to do a stair, a hall, and a drawing room, and the interior of the house did not match to that at all, so all I wanted to do was present a picture of an interior that would not contradict the exterior.
How many rooms were in that house? When was it built?
The actual house.
Yeah.
It seemed like an interminable number of rooms. If I were to guess, I would say 25. Yes?
I'm sorry, I came in late, maybe somebody's already asked it. But in the House of Dark Shadows, why didn't they try to use the same sets they used in the show? Is it more or less?
The reason for that was that they would be interfering with the studio operation. Don't forget, we were doing a show every day, and if they wanted to do a film, they couldn't conform to our schedule or their own, because in film, you operate much more slowly, and they would need much more time than we did to do a half-hour show every day. Over here. Laura burning. My recollection of that was that we violated every fire law in the state of New York. Detailed, okay. Well, I have to say that the fire inspector did come the day after. Now, if he had come the day that we shot that scene, we would have been closed down, and you would not have the entire project. Okay, that was, we wanted to have the effect of falling timbers in front of Diane, and I think she will attest that we created a successful illusion. She would have gotten out of there very fast if her feet weren't chained to the floor. But I knew when we started to do it that they would never allow it, and there had never been any kind of falling wreckage that could be accomplished in a studio. And what I devised was a very simple trick. We have these dollies, scenery dollies. How can I describe? They're like wagons with 4 wheels, and they have a framework coming up on the sides and over the top. And scenery would be laid onto these wagons and transported in and out of the studio. And I figured, well, being that it was on wheels and it had this goalpost kind of configuration, that I could design a couple of beams that would be pinned into the sides, and by pulling a pin from the other end, let that beam like pivot down. So it was really just this kind of a thing. It was not going to go any other place, which Diana didn't know. But it could only fall this way. And then we simply put, we used sterno, and we used lighter fluid, and maybe some kerosene, I can't remember. And on a cue, we would set these things burning just before the scene started, because they wouldn't burn very long, and it had to be back time. And we'd have the camera behind the wagon, and on a cue, we would pull the pin, and this beam that was on fire would appear to fall down. So it was as simple as that. And of course we had fire in other places, but that was set in pots behind barrels and boxes that were in that set. I'm surprised I remember all of this stuff. It comes back. Does that answer it?
Uh,
Over here. Yes.
noticed from time to time, like in the cemetery, sometimes a person would walk by and do the tombstone and it would
Wobble.
And sometimes when Robert Rose they would play Adam Cruz would wobble.
Yes, yes.
Why couldn't somebody simply nail this thing to the floor?
We had a concrete floor, so trees could not really be nailed down. The tombstones, of course, in order to get that look of carving on, were made out of styrofoam. And so they were terribly light. A breeze could blow them. Again, I guess we'd have to say that they should have shot those scenes over. But when they saw something move, and a lot of times we did, but sometimes the time, the clock beats, bared so heavily on us that we have to accept it and go on. And as I don't know if I mentioned this, but we did the entire show, not like today, did the entire show in one take. In other words, we started, we taped the whole thing without stopping. Today, they stop if there's an error, they correct the error and resume after that. We did not do that. There was not that kind of money or in the budget or time in it. So if you made a boo-boo, you had to live with that boo-boo. I mean, we honed it as well as we could until air. You had a question.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I really thought your sets were wonderful, and they really set the mood for the program.
Oh, thank you.
And it's
Thank
really
you.
loved down.
I'm glad I came here. This is my first time at the convention. I certainly will come again.
A lot of people have been asking, where did the portraits disappear to?
I know.
Two of them cropped up. Repeat the question.
A lot of people have been asking, where did the portraits get to?
You happen to know, whoever got them, if they would bring them to a convention, let us see it. We would all love to see it.
We're saying that if there are any portraits that can be found, that you would all love to see them. If I find or hear of any, of course, I will detour them to you.
Because we found antique portraits
Uh-huh.
and Dorian Gray portraits.
Yes. Oh. Okay. Very good. This gentleman over here.
You mentioned the occasion when you would take over. How often would you say you do that on the average? Like how many times a month would you take over?
Maybe once a month. That's it. Yeah, not even that, Diana. I don't remember it happening very often. It had to be a major calamity to tape something over. Yeah.
Yes, what was the style of furniture in the 1795 sequence in the main drawing room and the bedroom of the old house?
What about
style
them?
of furniture?
What style? Let me see. Eclectic? Well, I think what you have to say is you can't be a purist about a style of a period because nobody in any time period has a pure style, everything following a pure style of that period, because they will have bought things or acquired things from ancestors or 10 years ago or 20 years ago or yesterday. So that I never felt, yes, I would try and get furniture of the period, of the 90s, say. But if I couldn't find anything of the 90s, I would pick something that was maybe a little earlier, which would be acceptable, because that was realistic. As a matter of fact, there was one piece in the drawing room, which was a Jacobean cabinet or cupboard, which was practically center stage on the back wall. And every period that I did in the I left that piece there because it was like an heirloom. And you would never lose that piece. Even in 1999, it was still there. I wanted it to be there. Yes, ma'am?
Are you not doing Young and the Restless anymore?
No, I never did Young and Restless. I'm doing Bold and Beautiful, which is by the producer of Young and Restless. And I've been doing that since it went on the air in March, at the end of March. And before that, I did Capital, which was also a CBS. Oh, I got an Emmy on Capital. And from my mouth to God's ear, I'm planning on getting one for the Bold and Beautiful next year. Yes?
Do you ever have problems with censors from scenes like the hanging scene and blood coming out of tombstones, things like that?
I think we did have some problems. I don't remember any problems about the blood coming out of the portrait, but it seemed to me that I heard some comments about the hanging. And I think the way we handled that was that, well, of course, it's hard to dispose of an actor by hanging him. They don't allow that. So we simply achieved the effect of the hanging by seeing the rope being put around Victoria's neck and then cutting to the post from which the rope was suspended and seeing that rope jerk. And we assumed that, of course, Victoria was hanged. It's all those wonderful tricks. Yes, sir?
Could you tell us a little bit about how you created this set and how you felt when they told you that they wanted you to create hell?
Yeah, that's a tough thing to do, not ever having visited there. I think I kind of thought about Dante's Inferno and the illustrations from that. And of course the writers did suggest things like the, what did they call that bridge? But they wrote, I can't remember, there was a title for the suspended bridge that we used going into the gate of hell. But as I say, it was from the writers and from my own images of Dante's Inferno.
It seemed like there was a huge kind of a desk that Diablo set behind for a while.
Yeah, that was Nicholas Blair, wasn't it? Was it Nicholas Blair?
No.
God, it's fading from my memory. I have to look at those episodes. But as I say, whatever we could imagine from our own experiences and readings and pictures, and of course the writers. Yeah. In the back there. I'm sorry, I didn't hear. It was about Quentin. The staircase? I'm sorry, I'm not catching. Can you come forward a little bit more?
There was a staircase that went through time.
Oh, God, that house grew so many appendages while we were doing the show, because we would talk about the West Wing, and then we'd say, well, the West Wing has never been opened, and then we'd see that we were going into the West Wing, and then we would say, well, now there's a room in the East Wing, and then, what? I didn't know there was an East Wing. And so staircases and hallways just abounded whenever the writers needed another place to go. And we just would create, when in doubt, just spread some cobwebs and some eerie lights. Yes? No, actually, I wish they could have been real stained glass windows, but they were made out of a fiberglass, which was then, we took some, it's a composition that comes in like a toothpaste tube, and it creates the effect of leading, and that would adhere to the fiberglass panels, and then we would put coloring into all of that. And I don't think I've ever seen a better job than the job that we did on that window. And it was completely designed by myself and my assistant at the time. The nice thing about it is that our lighting director, Mel Handelsman, who was wonderful, he really helped create the mood and the atmosphere that what made it so successful visually. But we had, I remember that during the day we would use amber light behind that window, and at night we would use a kind of a lavender light, and it kind of told us when it was day or night by the color behind the glass. Over here.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you did the reflection of the water at the blue whale?
Well, that's really very simple, and you have to promise not to take it to another network. It's really just a metal pan in which you have pieces of broken mirror lying on the bottom, and then you put water in that pan, and then you shine a light into the pan, and when the reflection goes up on whatever surface you're looking to create that illusion.
That's great.
Now you're special effects. Man behind you.
Who came up with the idea of Barnabas' wolf-headed cane, and did y'all design that and make it or find it someplace?
It seemed to me that they said they wanted a wolf-headed cane, and they told what's his first name? Our property man, Artie. They said, get us a cane with a wolf's head on it. And so he scoured New York until he came up with one and brought it back. Yes.
How did the set for the blue whale itself come about?
Well, we decided that it should be on the waterfront. And so what better way to show that we were on the waterfront than to have a big window that had the reflections of the water on it. So that kind of set the tone. And then we just did it in kind of rustic wood and the nautical motif of the fish nets. And somebody had said it was the blue whale, so that gave us the fisherman kind of motif. Yes?
What particular problems, if any, did it present for you when they asked you to design a column wood in parallel time? It was essentially the same time period. And was there a reason why there was no longer a portrait of a family member over the fireplace in the drawing room? They had a portrait of a landscape.
We did a landscape because it was a different time period, mostly. Not so much that it was parallel time, because it was time warp, I think. And we were in a different time period. And so I felt that I needed to change some of the furniture and some of the look of the room. And that's when I put up the landscape. Yes. There was another part to your question.
No, I just
any changes? Yeah. Yeah. Over here.
Yes, I was wondering about the set designs for Ryan's Hope. Did you do the original set for Ryan's Bar?
Yes,
What years did you do that?
I worked on Ryan's Hope from 19 1975 until 1983. It was 8 years, and that's the longest I ever stayed any place. The reason I was hired, I think, was because Dark Shadows was done from that studio, and the ABC executive who had worked with me when I was doing Dark Shadows told the producers of Ryan's Hope, if you're going to be in this studio, you should get Sy Tomashoff to work for you because he can make the sets fit in this studio. It's a very small studio. And if I was able to fit Dark Shadows in there, then they felt he's the guy who can do a show in there. Yes. Over here.
Thank you, Brian. So, were you there when Brian's bar blew up?
No, thank you.
You didn't know if the bars they have today look the same as they did then. And I started watching today after the bar blew up, so I never saw the original.
Oh, you never saw the original?
No, I
The original was beautiful. And I'm not saying that because I did. They blew it up and then they redesigned it, and I think their thought was to make it more contemporary, and I'm being nice. More contemporary, and I don't know, they just wanted to shake off the traditional heritage of it and go more with a younger audience, or an audience that wasn't tied to the past that way. Over here.
When the series ended, were any of the sets ever used on anything else, or were they just all torn down?
There were pieces of the sets that were used on other shows. I saw them, and as a matter of fact, I probably used some of them myself, although I did, for a long time, say, I'm not going to incorporate any of Dark Shadows scenery into anything that I do. But I think I may have used the doors to the drawing room at some time or other, because they were good doors. Which? Gardeners? Oh, yes. It's very possible. I did One Life to Live for 3 years, incidentally. God. Yeah. I've been traveling a lot of soaps. Yes?
When a set has to be built or made, do you have to do a lot of research and watch like old horror movies to give you some ideas? I mean, where would your inspiration come in general?
I always liked horror movies. So I guess that, there was kind of a built-in research right there. And then, of course, any job that I do, I always, before I sit down and do the actual drawings, I like to fill my head with as much research and imagery as I possibly can. And I get that from magazines, or from library books, or books that I have myself, or from other movies. And as I say, horror movies were always one of my favorites, so I could slip right into that kind of flavor.
Do you have a favorite set?
Oh, on Dark Shadows. I guess I would have to say that the foyer and the drawing room really were my favorite, because they lasted the entire series, and the directors never had any complaints about finding an interesting shot or vantage point. And I did design it in such a way that the vistas through the rooms was good. For instance, I designed it in such a way that you could stand outside the window of the drawing room and shoot straight through the drawing room doors, the arch to the front door and the front door, and then vice versa. You could shoot from the front door and see all the way out the back window. So that I was very conscious of what the camera could do, and tried to make that as interesting as possible. And of course the directors, I think, did find that and the fact that they had the added level at the back of the foyer and could place scenes up there. So it really, I felt, it was a successful design that helped the directors. Over here.
I was just thinking, it was kind of interesting a few weeks ago, when Adam went up to carry out his experiment against Vicky. He came in when the experiment with Eve failed.
Yes.
And he was going to go carry out his threat. She went upstairs bedroom, and he crawled in the window and then crawled back out the window to make his escape. And it's a second story.
This is Victoria's window?
Yeah. And then they showed Barnabas going upstairs to save her. At first I thought, well, maybe she is on the first floor. And then,
No, she's on the second floor.
yeah, and he went upstairs, and I went, okay, well, and when they showed the outside of the house, there's no ledges. I mean,
But you didn't see the east side of the house. You only saw the south side. Yeah, well, I guess that started because we knew that, well, we didn't know when we designed Vicky's room that there was going to be a vampire. But of course the vampire very often made his entrance into Vicky's room outside of her windows, you know, flapping his wings and then coming through the window. Although, as I recall, Jonathan never had to climb in that window. We just saw the bat outside the window, and then we cut to Jonathan inside the room. Just saving him the extra wear and tear. Yes? Maybe it was the laboratory, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. What did we call it then? We didn't call it Dr. Jekyll. Huh?
John Yeager, Cyrus Longworth.
Was that his name?
Yes.
I think the laboratory, and they also the, I call it the pendulum. We had somebody tied to a slab, and we had this pendulum. Yeah. Some of these things are getting very dim in my memory, but I do remember saying, well, you know, how am I going to come up with a design for this? Because the pendulum did have to come closer and closer to the body. And I don't know how we did it. There's a hand back here.
Questions regarding candles. Were there any particular incidents or mishaps or feelings you had about using so many candles? And in the mausoleum, even if nobody had been in there for 100 years, your candles were lit.
We call that dramatic license. Well, all I can tell you is that when I saw the number of candles that we were using, I said I would like to be the supplier of the candles because I could make more than my salary, certainly. Over here.
There was one incident that Terrain Crawford mentioned when she was doing the scene where she was supposed to exit by a doorway and it was locked. She said she then tried to crawl out a window and then they had to cut the scene. There was also another scene where Joan Bennett tried to leave. She went up the steps and tried to leave.
Get out the door.
It was locked. Was there any reason why these doors were locked? Or were they just stuck?
The only reason that I can give is that the prop man wasn't paying attention to what was going on that day. And he goofed.
The door in front of the stairs was always locked.
Was it?
Unless someone unlocked it before we shot.
So it was really a precaution because if you went out there, you could fall and hurt yourself.
Fell on your face. There was nothing
Yeah,
there.
there was nothing there. The only thing that was there, as a matter of fact, were pictures that we stored on the back of the sets. Yeah.
That was the prop man's job.
Yes. Yes.
Was there ever an effect on Dark Shadow that you built and that for some reason was never used or never appeared on the show?
No, we didn't have that kind of money. No, we used everything. As a matter of fact, we used everything. More than once, we would convert a set. We had the caretaker's cottage, which was converted many times. It started out as a very rustic kind of a place, and developed into a very luxurious looking house. Where was your house, Diana? That was the cottage, and it was beautiful then, when we made it into your cottage.
Yes, it was. It got more beautiful.
As time went by, we could embellish it.
Decorate.
Yeah. Yes, but there were cases where sets would change, and we would reuse them. Marcy, how are we on time? I mean, I don't want to interfere with that.
Probably just a couple more on this side. We'll check the two. We'll take a couple more. I'll check.
Okay. Yes, over here.
I have a curiosity about that. Did they light the fireplace? If they did, then how did people from burning? Because the flap, I know, I've worked on making campus.
Yes. Well, I remember that when we first went to meetings and I had designed a fireplace in there, someone from ABC said, are you going to want to light that fire in the fireplace? And I said, always. We eventually, as I recall, when we started out, there was no provision made, and they would just let the smoke go up into the studio. But then there was complaints from the engineering department that their camera lenses were getting coated, and that the smell was bad. And so finally they did inaugurate a portable flue kind of a system, where over that fireplace there was a flue, and we had two others at different parts of the studio, so that if we were to connect a fireplace, I had to build the set near where that flue was. If it had a fireplace, it was going to work in it. It was a very real thing, you're right.
Yeah, because I was wondering, because I know, that's really hard to do. I've been in play, and I know it's really hard to do that.
Yes. You'll have actors walking out if you don't get rid of that smoke. Hey, you had a question over here.
Yes, was it just coincidence that the knocker on Old House was a replica of the knocker in the Picket Mausoleum? The lion in the ring?
I think it was more expedience than coincidence. It was kind of a good-looking, good character knocker. That's it was a nice motif. I don't think they were the same manufacturer or anything like that. I think it was just a coincidence. Did I see any more hands?